All right, we're going to go ahead and call ourselves to order then. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are meeting virtually as a result of the request by Governor Lee at the beginning part of the year. So at that point, we'll go ahead and call the roll, Ms. Kinzer. Ms. Kinzer, did we lose you?
She's muted. There she goes.
Ms. Hopkins. I see Ms. Hopkins. Mr. Fulbright's here. Mr. Moore. Mr. Zervin. Mr. Sims.
Present.
Mr. Hooper. Mr. Howell. Mr. Lindsay.
Here.
Mr. Dudley. I didn't hear from Ms. Parker, and Mr. Dudley's not here.
I'm here.
Okay, good. All right.
Just to clarify, we have everyone here except for Mr. Dudley tonight. Is that correct? All right, sounds good.
Correct.
We have our items on the consent part. Do we need to go over any of the old minutes or the use of facilities? If not, we'll move on to new business. Who from the budget department's here tonight? Do we have either Schiffer or Mr. Laconin?
Let me reach out to Doug because he said he was going to have a representative at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I know he was on with the commission earlier, so hopefully we can have somebody. Appreciate everybody's patience as we try to make sure we have our representative with us.
Jack, can you send the link to Doug, or is it on the webpage?
I just sent it to Doug and Schifra.
Okay.
Thank you all for reaching out to him. One thing while we do wait, I'd like everybody just to glance at your calendars because later in the meeting, we're going to need to pick out a date to do our a Saturday morning planning retreat. We're not going to decide that at this moment right now, but just start thinking about what Saturday would be good. I had one picked out, but then last time I looked at my calendar, the date had already passed and I hadn't scheduled it. So we'll try to get something pulled together.
Hey, Tommy or Jake, where is the link on our website?
It's not there right now.
Do we know if it's going to be Schiffer or Doug that's going to be joining us?
It's me. It's
Schifra
Schifra
just
today.
joined.
Oh, great. Well, good to have you.
Yeah, I never received the link. I've been trying to get a hold of somebody to get a link.
Well, we're glad you made it. Sorry for any confusion.
All good.
We are at the finance part. That's why we've been so eagerly anticipating either you or Mr. Laconin.
Yes, and we've got budget, well, one of the first items is the surplus property on there, and that's just items that have been surplus by different departments around the district that are just getting sold on Gov Deals. And once we sell items on Gov Deals, you guys usually get a budget amendment for it to put it back to the department that were bought, that usually the items were sold for. And then there's budget amendments, and then there's financials. I'm open to any questions. If y'all want to go over the budget amendments, I'm more than happy to go over them.
Let me first ask, does anybody have any specific questions on any of the specific budget amendments?
This is Kristen. I do
Yeah.
have questions on 2 of the budget amendments.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with those 2 first.
Okay. The first one is budget amendment 185. And in there, it's talking about Mount Pleasant High School, but it says cover the cost of materials for CHS construction. I was just wondering if that should say MPHS.
Actually, this is Lori
Yes.
Brown, and that is for a shed that was built by CHS Construction, and we are moving that to Mount Pleasant High School to be used by the welding program. And that's the amount that it cost for that shed to be built by the students in the construction program, and we're just replacing those funds from the funds out of CTE to cover the cost of that shed.
Okay, that makes sense. I was thinking that you guys that Mount Pleasant usually builds a house and then sells it, and so I was thinking that it was for that type of.
Well, that's normally how both of those programs worked, just because that's how they started.
Right.
But they've had we've had changes in personnel at the Central High School one, and this is the first product that they've sold since the last house. And with Mount Pleasant, they're still working on the tiny house.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
The other one I had a question about was not CTE related, but it's regarding the Juvenile Detention Center funds.
Okay.
Budget amendment 190. I'm just curious how the decision was made as to how to allocate those funds.
I don't know if Mr. Gaines is on. This is Mr. Lang. I can speak to that.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. These funds, first of all, are from 2 years ago. We really worked to get these funds from Shelby County during the first year of the state deciding that the LEA, that the Juvenile Detention Center would be, that's housed in that county, would provide the academic services. So it was all new. We were able to work with them. We paid all of our bills from the other counties and that we were reimbursed for, and so this was excess. So what we did, we wanted to, in these unprecedented times, we know that there are restrictions on the amount of attendees at ball games, etc., placed on us by TSSAA, and also the cost of officials. So what we've done, we've asked to use some of the funds that were extra funds there to support, to pay for officials, strictly officials in the athletic realm, to just help schools navigate through this pandemic. Right now, they only allow a certain number of tickets per athlete, and we were down to 2 tickets, and they could not pay. And we're trying to keep from schools falling into the red. So we're using funds to equitably, based on the school size, basically, and the self-contained high schools versus the unit schools, and also versus middle schools. So we really want to support them and keep them moving forward. Also, we're asking that the the same amount of funds are used for visual and performing arts. We've had many requests from visual and performing arts programs. They, especially last spring, for example, we had drama cast to purchase rights to plays that they were not able to put on, which the loss of revenue compounded with the cost of purchasing the materials and play settings, etc., and the lack of fundraising opportunities. So we wanted to make sure that our athletics and our visual and performing arts were treated equally, and we also have a equitable dispersion between the high schools from $2,000 for each program, and they're strictly for paying officials, all the way down to $1,200 for middle schools. Any other questions on that?
I don't think so.
Mr. Lindsay?
Mr. Lane, will that money be distributed amongst all sports?
Yes, sir. It will go to the athletic program. We will work with finance to have them request it, but it's for all sports to help with volleyball referees, all the way to soccer referees, etc.
Thank you, sir.
It's not just for one program.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I was gonna make a quick statement on it too, Mr.
Go ahead.
Fulbright.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Lang, Mr. Gaines, and myself and our office, we have been in conversations because something that we have, and I know Kristen has actually, Ms. Parker has actually brought this up in meetings before too, is the equitable part of making sure when we pull any district funds that they are split across the schools in an equal manner. That has been an issue at the district before, because honestly, I'm not even gonna lie about it, because it's no use. Before we took over, we were never even told that that was a requirement by the state to make sure each place was appropriated based off of the number of population of students. So of course, anything that we do now, we make sure it is equitable across the board. And Mr. Lang and Mr. Gaines have been talking about making sure whatever money is given at each schools is basically divided based off of the number of students out there. And we already did a budget amendment a few months ago for art funds, and all the monies that were divided were not based on, being elementary or whatever. It was actually based off of the exact number of kids at each school before we distributed that money across the board. So the same thing is what I understand is going to happen with these funds, is Mr. Lang and Mr. Gaines are going to get together and figure out how much can be appropriated to each location.
Okay, thank you. Any other conversations or any other discussions on the budget amendments? 13 of them are listed right here.
Are we moving these to the consent?
That was exactly what I was saying. If not, we'll go ahead and move these 13 to consent. All right, monthly financials. Schiffer, do you have anything for us?
This month was really good because I think most of the escrows and stuff go ahead and start paying the property tax. So we brought in really good revenues, and the accounts are actually not in a deficit right now. But this is usually the month of December, January, and February are our best months. So the financials are looking good right now. Doug worked on some projections a few months ago, so his projections did include for these months to be really good. But I think after February is done, I'm really hoping to bring you all a proper projection with Doug and everything. That's when we really will see if we actually beat the mark on how much we budgeted for property tax versus how much we really brought in, since they're due till the end of the month. But this month we have a really good surplus right now.
That's great, but it's one of those things we kind of have to make sure it lasts us for a while too.
Exactly. These are, like I said, these December, January, and February are our best months. And after February, Doug usually likes to go through the financials on both sides and see what the property tax looks like in March and try to do estimates on, where we might end up.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. Any other questions on the monthly financials? Seeing none, I think that takes care of our financial section. Number 2 under instruction, ESSER 2.0 presentation. Who wants to take
Mr.
that?
Chair, that'll be Renee Polakovich. She has an update on the additional funding we're receiving through ESSER, and I'll
Okay,
turn
great.
it over to her.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, Mr. Chairman, board members. I have a presentation just to go over briefly so you are aware of the funding that we will be receiving as a district through the stimulus bill that was passed. So I'm going to place that on the screen, I think, so you can see it. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So through the elementary secondary school emergency relief funding, ESSER 2.0, we will be receiving some additional funding and just some background information. This new funding was made available as part of the stimulus package that President Trump signed on December 27th. This is a continuation of the ESSER funds that we received back in March of 2020 under the CARES Act. We are calling it ESSER 2.0. That's what the state and the federal government are calling it, to make a distinction between this grant award and the first. These are non-recurring grant funds. So we need to be looking at one-time costs because the money will not continue beyond the grant. And anything that we purchase that has ongoing costs, we would need to have a plan for sustainability once these grant funds are gone. Just an overview of the funds. Allowable uses are the same as they were with the first grant, which was back in March. They've added some key additional focus areas for us, and that is addressing student learning loss and facility repairs and improvements. Those need to be facility repairs and improvements that limit the transmission and exposure to COVID-19 and other environmental health hazards. And there's some listed examples there that we could use the funding for in regards to repairs and facility improvements. The funds can be backdated for anything that we have expended for March 13th, 2020. So if we have projects that we've already paid for, we could use these funds to reimburse those as well. We as a district will have to do monthly reports on the expenditure of these funds, as well as the first batch of funds that we received, the ESSER 1.0, which we have not had to do thus far. So they're now adding this reporting requirement onto both grants. And unlike the first grant, this one, there is no requirement to share funds with non-public schools. The first grant, we did have to shave off some money and we provide services and buy things on behalf of non-public schools. That is not part of this grant. This is just an example of some allowable expenditures that I pulled out to give you an idea of some of the bigger pots that districts are going to be looking at, and the state is really asking us to focus on certain areas here. Summer programming, extended learning, new curriculum, classroom furniture needed for social distancing, PPE. These are all things that were allowable under the first round. They remain allowable uses. These are some unallowable things that the state has called out and made note of in the last few weeks, and that is pre-K expenditures. This grant is for K-12 only, facility repairs and improvements that are not directly related to keeping students safe from exposure or transmission to COVID-19, raises for teachers, land purchases, and new construction. The timeline that the TDOE has announced is the application will be available tomorrow in ePlan. It's an online application, probably much like the first. When this presentation was written, they had not established a deadline for submission yet. However, in the last day or so, they have indicated that the grant application will be due March 1st. We thought the timeline would be much shorter because the commissioner has been telling us that we needed to be ready to do this on a very quick timeline. So
We plan to hopefully get it in earlier, but March 1st is the deadline that has been announced. Funds must be obligated by September 30th of 2023. This is the timeline that we have developed as a district for implementation. The items in blue have been completed, the items in green are in process, and the red have not been started but will be. So we've surveyed our principals and supervisors at central office to ask them what they felt their priority areas were around addressing student learning loss, repairs in facilities, issues that are allowable, and technology. The survey responses were gathered. We summarized those and shared those at a principals meeting last week. And it was pretty unanimous that we all agree that we need to focus on finishing up technology purchases so that students have access to computers in all grades. And then the learning loss, we're looking at summer programming, possibly after school interventions, things like that were at the top of the list on survey results. In green then are things that are in process. We're continuing to work at the district level, and we have meetings scheduled over the next week or two to look at how much money remains from ESSER 1.0, any other sources that we could use to cobble together all of the funds that are available and identify priority needs to be supported. And then things that we must do in the coming weeks is actually submit the application to TDOE, establish our internal processes and procedures for those data reports that are due every month, continually monitoring the use of the funds, and if our priorities shift, adjusting our budgets as necessary, and then we will provide quarterly reports to the board regarding our progress towards expending the funds and what's been successful and what needed to be changed. So here is the amount of money that we're looking at. 81.9 billion was awarded nationally through this recent grant. Just to give you some idea of the size, the first grant that we received was 31 billion nationally, so this is significantly larger. Tennessee has received 1.1 billion, and in the first round we received 259 million. Murray County Public Schools will receive a little over 8 million, so 8,095,367. We only received around 2.1 in the first round, so 4 times more this time around. And then again, funds must be obligated by September 30th of 2023. This was just to say I would change it, and that's really the summary of the grant, what we've received, and how we need to proceed. So if there are any questions, I can take those.
Mr. Moore?
Yeah. So, Mr. Hickman, I guess my question is, I appreciate that we're getting some input from the principals, but I'm kind of wondering, as a district, this is a lot of money to spend. I mean, I was kind of wondering what your ideas on what you're looking to accomplish, because it seems like we might be able to accomplish some pretty good things with this amount of money. I know when we were trying to piece together the 2.1 million, it was it got eaten up very quickly. So I'm just wondering what your ideas are on the spending here.
Great question. The first thing, I kind of have to agree with the administrators that we need to go ahead and look at not only getting those devices for our K through 3, but we also, Tommy has came in and said we need to start looking forward to as we start replacing those items as well. That will probably be the big chunk. And then I've spoken to instruction, and one of the things that I really feel that we need in this district is we need some type of an assessment to figure out what learning loss is. There's several ones out there that we're looking at right now, because we need to get better about trying to find out where our students are and on a common level. So those are the big funds. We've also talked about maybe even a possibility, because of the where we're going to have to be going back and forth with the state, possibly even doing an interim position to look over those funds as well. And then we can use that in some other areas, kind of a dual purpose position. So those are the big ticket items. We've also gone to Eric, seeing that they've given us an opportunity to use those funds in operations, and talked about maybe some areas that we would be willing to use some of that money on as well. And Eric has came up with some ideas and some lists as well that he's put on our list of things that we feel that we need to do. The next step will be to prioritize those lists and try to be fiscally responsible on how we spend that. 8 million sounds like a lot, but it also, as you know from the first one, you went through it really quickly, really fast. And if you'd like, I think Eric's on here and he can talk to you about some of the operations type deals that he sees that some areas we can use it on.
Good evening, everybody. We've got a list of projects that we have at some places in the district already completed, other places we haven't, some that deal directly with the way air flows around our building. We do have 4 shovel-ready HVAC projects that have already been vetted and that we know the cost of in Mount Pleasant Middle, Mount Pleasant Elementary, Riverside, and Spring Hill Elementary. We have those projects that could possibly be attacked. We have door issues at many places throughout the district. And then we have some distancing issues that we feel like we can do some minor things in the building that wouldn't cost a lot, that if we ever ran into social distancing issues again, we could handle students a little bit better with some basic furniture maybe at the elementary level that we used to have that we no longer have, because as you transition through the different designs of furniture, sometimes kidney tables and things went away, and now we see that there's a need for them, and teachers are saying they can work from that. Biggest thing that we see is it ties directly to HVAC, ties directly to air quality throughout the building, and we're looking at filters, we're looking at different types of things that we could possibly change. That again, the 8 million, you start dividing it out, what would the cut for operations be? And depending on what that breakdown would be after the computer needs were met, after the learning loss gap is closed, would really determine what we kind of approached and how we moved forward with it. And it would all be on our end be based on that final number that we were given that would be portioned to us.
Can I follow up that, Mr. Fulbright, please?
Sure, go ahead.
If I could just say, I know it goes very far, and I definitely would like to be involved as you guys put that together. But I'd have to say that I really hope we find the way to spend as much as possible to address the learning loss issue. I mean, I know there's a big wish list of things that I would love for us to be able to tackle. But I would just love to use as much of this gifted money that we're getting here to address directly learning loss. I don't know what that looks like yet. I hope you guys are working on it. But I just really hope we've got a really good opportunity here, not only to address the learning loss, but possibly get ourselves where we should have been anyway, as far as some things like I saw curriculum was approved on there. We could do some stuff like that. I just think we got a good opportunity here to use this and identify where we're at, and then hopefully make up for that and maybe even get a little ahead on some of that stuff if we set ourselves up right. So that would be my preference as a board member moving forward. As much as we can on that, addressing the actual academic side of this, I would love to see it.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines.
Good evening. Yes, we are definitely, to address Mr. Ward's request, we are definitely looking at planning on a learning loss recovery, i.e. how we will plan for summer school, how we will set up a similar summer school block to run 6 weeks so that we can be able to address the learning loss to continue both before and after school through the next year and address learning loss during the next summer. Certainly that benchmark is a pivotal part of that, being able to address, seeing where we are in progress, and being able to address that. Just to let you know, as you know, the state is also proposing a bill where they're going to provide some funds to address learning loss, and they have drafted some similar plans where they're going to fund a 4-hour summer school for 45% of our district, or depending on how many students that you already can identify that are below proficiency. But as you know, that depends on votes and how that goes. So we're going to go ahead and look at where we are and set our budget up to address the learning loss. And if we get funds from the state, then we can always go back and relook at reallocating those funds to other projects as needed. But that's kind of what we want to do, is have that approach where we are going to use those funds to address learning loss. If we get additional funds from the state, if they do approve those and we're able to receive those, then we can then amend our project and address other items.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindsay.
Is this grant something that has to be approved by the board before you submit it? This application?
Yes. As with any budget, as with any funding, we would present the budget to you prior to approval.
And I think she said it and I missed it. What is the application deadline?
March 1st.
But let me say a little bit about that, if you don't mind, real quick.
Go ahead.
The sooner, it's kind of, if we wait to March 1st, then we may not be appropriated the money until April. But I'm not trying to expedite it, but I just want to be clear. They are going to do kind of a first come, first serve on those.
No, and the reason I was asking, Mr. Fulbright brought up a while ago that we need to be looking at our calendars for a retreat on a Saturday or something. I just thought possibly this could be a good topic if you guys could be ready with that sometime this month. But not trying to rush you, but just throwing out ideas.
Whether it's completed or not, I think it would be a good part of the conversation. All right, Ms. Parker.
I just wanted to echo what Mr. Moore said about how we use these funds. I will say, regardless of what principals say, having a second grader, I have serious concerns about the value of a device in the hands of my second grader as opposed to curriculum. And I feel like I've talked to lots of parents that have similar children, and I really have concerns about us allocating too much money to a second grader with an iPad. I also think that the learning loss, regardless of what the state gives us, is probably not going to be enough to cover what these kids need. They've essentially had at least 2 months of virtually no school last year and in and out this year. I was talking to a parent earlier, and they said they felt like they've taught their kids more this year than their kids' teachers have, because they've had to be quarantined multiple times for various exposures. So I really don't think we can ever have enough, spend enough to address the learning loss at this point.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin.
Thank you. I was just going to echo, similar to David and Kristen, what they've said. Everybody's pretty much right on track. But I know Mr. Gaines, when he was speaking, he had mentioned about summer school programs potential. But like what Kristen said, I've heard from, I think even those who are normally not the struggling type of student, I think it's impacted our whole demographic. And I don't know what the answer is for sure. I know y'all are the professionals and trust that, but I would also like to hear your thoughts later on after you've had time to evaluate it about maybe different programs where you're implementing. I know there's several out there that maybe even parents can work with their kids. We can, like, even over the summer, like where they can do things to enrich. I know there's a lot of things that I've subscribed to my kids with. Just trying to think outside of the box on programs, in addition to a physical teacher in the class, because I think it's greater than just the ones that are typically deficient. I think it's all across the board. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, so there was something mentioned about, I guess, evaluating where our losses are. Are you guys looking at like bringing in a third party to do that, or some kind of tool? Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yes, sir. We are looking at some of the third party or off the shelf assessments, ones that are aligned to our curriculum, not just our curriculum, but our state standards. It's not just finding out where our kids are today. We want to continue to keep up not just today, but in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, just to make sure that we are closing that gap of learning loss. So it's something we see not as a one-time proposition, but something that we're going to do routinely until we know that we are catching up or caught up, and then continue on past that and help it be a device that we can use, or a tool that we can use in our district moving forward to find out where our kids are at all times.
Well, if I could just say, I'll be honest, that kind of concerns me. And it concerns me because I feel like, again, I'm going to be simplistic. I'm not a teacher. I feel like our teachers should be able to know where our students are. And we shouldn't need to have a third party come in and tell us that either today or moving ahead. I mean, and again, I know I'm being a little simplistic on that, but I'm very worried that we would be just handing that off to something we should already be taking care of ourselves. And if we're going to be spending money, why aren't we spending that money to bring our internal staffing and our skill sets up to where we can handle that and handle that today and moving forward? That's what concerns me with spending money on a third party, because that just worries me. I think we should be taking care of this and ourselves.
And I will tend to agree with you. But one of the reasons that we want to look at this third party is not so much what it can give us in making these assessments, but the data and what it gives us back, the tracking devices, the reports, if you will, on what it can do for us there too. Although we can ask the teachers, which we have done. Generally, that's what we do, is bring teachers in to help make these assessments. Getting a third party would help us bring in these reports that would otherwise we generate from the school. This would generate for you. And we can do, if we do bring this up as a topic at a retreat, we can kind of show you what we're looking at so you can get a good eyeball of it, because it's more than, hey, here's your test. It's a lot more to it that we're looking for. We're looking for an assessment, one, that is based off our state standards, two, that will give us data back that we can use in real time, and then three, help us to continue with the different types of reports that we can see district-wide and be able to, teachers, it'd be easily accessible to them instead of them trying to figure out the numbers, the growth, and all that.
Okay. Well, again, I'll go ahead and throw my caution at that in the first place, and mainly because what I'm worried would happen is we have this assessment, we bring these tools in, it says that we have deficiencies in these areas, and we haven't allocated the funds, nor do we have the funds to address it. So at the end of the day, we're sitting with some information and we just don't have the means or the tools. So that would be my concern as we talk about that at retreat, which I think is awesome for us to talk about that further. But that would be my concern, is we get this information saying, well, we're deficient in these areas and we have no money to try to address them, which really, I can't see how it doesn't come down to spending money on curriculum, spending money on additional resources, as in warm bodies in the classrooms, helping to make this catch up. Which is really what I'm thinking is going to happen. I don't see any way around it. But anyway, we can discuss that further at a retreat. Thank you.
And I just want to add a cap onto that. I think that before we start looking at $8 million worth of spending, we probably need some sort of assessment to give us a little bit of guidance anyway, whether that comes from within or from an outside third party. I think that either one would be a valuable asset to push us in the right direction. Any other comments on this discussion? I do think that we should take this up as a part of our planning as we go forward, but obviously our staff is the one that will need to bring us vision of which way we're headed. If not, we'll move to our COVID update. It's always a fun part of our meeting. Who wants to take that one?
I can start it if you want, or unless.
Okay, yes, please.
Just want to let you know that, as you know, we have been in talks with our local emergency management, local health department, trying to get a way so we can administer vaccines to our teachers. We are currently administering our survey out to teachers to see who wants to take the vaccine. And so that way we'll be able to coordinate that number of vaccines we are to receive and be able to go ahead and move forward with that. As you know, there is, when we got ready to, when we pivoted at right before the break, we did some surveys concerning an AB schedule, and just those types of concerns, being able to look at, as we were continuing to have more pivots, how we could keep children in school and what would be an alternative to 100% remote. We look at responses from teachers. A lot of teachers feel like that in-person learning is becoming a risk just because of the number of cases that we're currently having in the county. So we have looked at the AB schedule, and we've staffed it out. And just to give you some general comments about the what we found, and let me pull the document back up. So just to talk about, and I want you to know that we have just as many concerns with a hybrid schedule as in terms of delivering curriculum, content, those things like that. As you know, in general, of course, everyone would rather be in person, but as an alternative to that, an AB schedule might allow us to continue school. In our summary and looking at remote learning, most schools are really against a pivot to hybrid. And, you know, some of those reasons are, you know, consistency in decisions, amount of work, and change in programming. There should be some confusion in stakeholders. Being able to continue RTI. Regardless of that, if we wanted to choose an AB schedule as an alternative to pivoting the district to remote, then, you know, some of the things so far that we know we need to do is give some heads up so that schools will have time to communicate with students, prepare them for that. Teachers will get prepared for that. So we need at least, you know, that 1 week notice of transition. Having a 1 day for an asynchronous, a transition day, either a Monday or Friday, is an asynchronous day. That would mean students would be working on something. Teachers would just be doing follow-up and those things like that. They would be doing assignments, those things like that. Then that would be a Monday or a Friday as an asynchronous day. We would give schools the discretion on working with their special populations in small groups, because there are going to be some students, as we do now, even with remote, that will need to come every day. And so we'll have to keep in mind those numbers as we, you know, pivot students to AB, choosing those groups and which students come when. Schools would be the best decision makers on which students come on which day. Of course, we'd have to look at what happens when we have inclement weather. As you know, right now, the state has said we cannot use remote days or those days for inclement weather days. So we would have to make adjustments to the schedule based on those days. If we do transition to an a AB day, the overwhelming feeling or desire from the instruction office is that we would stay in an AB schedule for a long period of time, maybe even a month, even do that, so that, you know, we could get to the transition, we could evaluate it, and then see if we want to transition back. You know, as we look at the vaccine being implemented, we know, according to most of the things we've heard, we're not at the end of our, I guess, dark days, so to speak, so far as transmissions. An A/B schedule might be an alternative to 100% remote.
Thank you. I just want to ask you real quickly, because I know the COVID team is looking at numbers pretty heavily, and I know we're not using county numbers, but I do want to ask this question. I'm just looking at today's active cases for the county, and it's down to the lowest that I've seen it since Christmas. Do you feel like, or does the team feel like that is in any way a reflection of the vaccine becoming more more available? Or is that kind of just a fluke? Because it is coming off a 3-day weekend, and I thought it would be a huge spike upward. You don't have to go into in depth on that one. I just, I guess, wanted to hear myself ask it more than anything else.
The answer to that is no. We haven't vaccinated enough individuals to really see that significant of an impact and dip. We typically start seeing a decrease on Tuesdays. It is the lowest since Christmas, but it does start going down on Tuesday, Wednesdays, etc.
All right. Thank you very much for that input. Ms. Kinzer.
Just a question. I know early on, Mr. Hickman and Mr. Gaines, there was a discussion about what Lawrence County is doing, and I had an opportunity to visit with a Lawrence County teacher and how they felt they'd been really successful in having Wednesday as a remote, 2 days in class, then Wednesday remote, and then 2 days back in, and that had worked pretty well for them. And I know that was mentioned early on. Have you had any more discussions about that?
In our discussion with teachers, Monday or Friday seems to be the best day so that we have time for that packet distribution. As you know, we do packet pickup. It would be a natural transition to do that on a Monday or a Friday.
Okay. So you've considered that?
Yes.
As being, that's all.
And Scott, I'm sorry, this is Beverly. I would just add that we did a survey of elementary parents before Christmas, and the elementary parents overwhelmingly preferred either a Monday or a Friday if we had to do a asynchronous day.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Kinzer, do you have any other questions? Okay. Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you. So I guess I'm still confused about the whole hybrid. Are we doing that? Are you guys saying you want to go that route, or are we just still looking at it and kind of playing with it? I guess that's where I'm lost.
So we're continuing to look at just the case count, what's going on, and then looking at, of course, we could pivot to hybrid, but as we look at the case count, if it continues to stay down, then our intention would be to, of course, stay in person. I think we're really looking at this hybrid schedule that is an alternative to these dark days that they're predicting.
Okay. Well, I guess let me rephrase that. It feels to me like you guys are only looking at that because some members of the board have said they like that idea. And what I hear when you talk about it is that it's staff, it seems like, really isn't in favor of doing this. And this is where I'm getting kind of a mixed signal. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot for that, but it's just, it's kind of, I wish staff would just come to us. If you guys don't think it's a good idea, tell us you don't, get it off the table and let's move on. If you do think it's a good idea, let's really get into it. But I'm getting both sides of that from the discussion here, and it's a little perplexing as a board member. I just wish you guys would decide kind of where you want to go with this and pick one, because I really don't have an opinion either way. I just am very confused by the mixed message here. That's what's troubling to me.
I can respond to that, Scott. One of the things we did was back in December, we decided to let one of our schools tried the hybrid instead of being closed. They asked us, they said they'd like to give it a try, so we were good with it. When they came back, the results were very successful for that particular school. So at that moment, we started talking, is this something that we could do instead of pivoting to remote? Because we knew that, going back to learning loss, we really felt that we need to get kids in person as much as possible. But part of that was, and we knew that it's going to be more than just flipping a switch and making it happen. So we've gone out and we started talking to our principals, and they're talking to schools, and we're doing it by PLCs to say, what do you guys see? What's going on? What would be the problems? What would be the benefits? And so we got those responses back, and Scott kind of hit it a little bit. And the biggest problem that we see is, one, is if we do it, it has to be at least a whole week or more. And the schools were saying that they can't even see it just for a week. They see it that we have to do it for multiple weeks to really see the benefits of it, because of having kids in 1 week and then out a couple of days and back in another week and then back in the hybrid, the inconsistency of trying to deliver instruction that way. So that's kind of where we're at with it. It's really, we know since we've been trying it, the buzz has been, we've been hearing from the board, hey, have y'all considered this and thought about it? And it was something that was brought up in an earlier board meeting, and it was really, there was really a distaste for it at that, and I believe it was in the August one. And Scott might want to speak about that part. And I believe even Ms. Parker had brought it up as well then too. And so what we wanted to do first, before we took a step into it, was to see if it's going to be possible for us to even do that. And if so, once again, what's going to be the positives and what's going to be the parts that we're going to be worried about. And Scott, did you want to say anything else about that? And then I'm sorry to kind of take over that.
No, that's okay. Certainly, I think we did bring it up as when we were doing our continuous learning plan as an option to look at. And I think I'll go back to what some board members said. I think they really leaving it up to staff. And as we looked at it, we didn't look as hard into AB because we were looking at, can we go in person? And so that's where we concentrate our efforts. I think now that now that schools have been pivoted, I mean all of our schools have been pivoted. They've kind of gotten their some experience. I guess you call it some combat experience at doing remote learning. I think they now have some experience in speaking of what would be the pitfalls and how can we do it better. So that's now why we're looking at this option, because I think if we did do it, we could at least do a better job of it. We will know some of the pitfalls. We've looked at some of what the other counties are doing, how they're doing it. What are some things we can do better? Certainly, we know that we're going to have to really look at our pacing and overall the balance of we can keep children safer, so to speak. We can do more social distancing if we do AB. Given if we continue to have an increased case count, this would be an option that we could use rather than just 100% pivot to remote. Some of you talked about in terms of like the technology and things. I know we have some people who are adverse to devices in younger students' hands, but there are lots of content that's going to be delivered via the state, and a lot of that stuff is going to be delivered virtually. And I think we're just happening to be able to give our students a leg up by being able to provide that device. Certainly, we'll be able to not produce as many materials. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, we can certainly put money into paper and those things like that to create packets, but having those devices will have us be able to deliver that content virtually or digitally. And not saying that that's the exact answer that we want to do, but it gives us a chance to continue to train our students to use technology as a device, not as just a tool to help them learn. We know that we all have computers, that they're part of our life. We have an opportunity to continue to teach our students to use those devices as a tool for learning, not just as the way to learn.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Parker?
Thank you. I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but the first thing I want to say is I guess I kind of disagree on the discussion about the August meeting. I think AB was thrown out and I should look at it. I don't think that this board's responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school. And to me, how we get kids in school is a decision that you guys have to make. What's the best way to do that? What concerns me, and I think I've been pretty upfront all along about it, is I don't think packets are the best way to educate kindergarten through fourth grade. And I've been very vocal about that. You can talk about devices, and devices are great. And luckily my kids have access to devices, but that's not the same. It's not, I would rather them be in school, honestly. And to me, the focus should have been on figuring out how we deliver instruction, particularly to kids that don't have devices. Because we have distributed devices to 5th grade and up, I believe, at this point. But 4th grade and below have not had it. And I think it is not fair to our parents to ask them to basically be the teachers for their children if that's what our role is. And that's what bothers me. Talking about AB, all the ins and outs of it, I don't care. But my question is, what do we do to get kids in school and not starting and stopping, not pivoting 1 week because somebody got exposed and being out for 2 weeks, or being out for 24 days because their parents got exposed? Like, how do we keep kids in school and deliver instruction on a daily basis, Monday through Friday? Not interrupting for, we give out packets at this time and we have packets turned in on this time. And I mean, that's the frustrating part. So I really don't care if we go AB. And at this point, I'm a little disappointed that we're still trying to figure it out and asking people, like, do you like AB? What do you think about it? I've asked teachers the same thing. That's kind of like asking my kids, like, do you want to do your homework tonight? Like, I mean, at some point, y'all just got to tell people what they've got to do to keep kids in school. And if that's AB, great. If that's something else, great. Tell them what it looks like. But I think they're looking to central office to tell them what to do. And if we have a school that was able to implement AB in a week and pivot all their students to AB, and from what the sounds of it, continue to have their kids on AB even after the break, like, if they can come up with it, I'm pretty sure that people at central office should be able to come up with it for the system as well. That would be my hope. I understand wanting it to be for multiple weeks. And honestly, that's what I've heard, not just from teachers, but I've heard it from parents too. Parents do not want a phone call on Tuesday night saying, yeah, we're going back to school on Thursday. And then getting a call on Saturday saying, oh yeah, by the way, your kid's class is shut down. Like, they just want to be able to plan. And like 2 days, it's not a lot of time to plan. I mean, I know we're doing the best that we can, but I think that's really been frustrating for parents who are trying to earn their own living and meet the requirements that they have at their job and balance their responsibilities as a parent. So the more notice, the more planning that we can provide, the more predictability that we can give our parents, our students, our teachers, I think it would be better. So I don't know what that looks like. I trust y'all to figure out what is best, but we can bat things around for a long time and talk ourselves out of a lot of different things. If AB is not the answer, that's fine with me. But I will tell you, I don't think what we're doing right now is the answer either. So what is the other option? And I'm open to whatever, but I really do want to hear what is the solution at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay?
I guess I want to echo some of what Ms. Parker just said. I've gotten some feedback from parents that I just wanted to pass along, and Ms. Parker kind of hit on it. But I think some frustration that parents have is we're living from day to day, making decisions on what we're going to do, depending on what numbers look like today, and that's tough for a lot of people, and I understand their frustrations. And I think what parents are asking for, and maybe even teachers are asking for, is some type of heads up that whatever we revert to, anytime we make a change, whether we're going from in person to AB to remote, whatever it may be, that we were able to give them some type of heads up and give everybody time to prepare. And someone mentioned to me today along these lines, rather than looking at numbers each day, maybe it would be more beneficial if we looked at numbers once a week and looked at trends, and then, say that we decide on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it may be, that, hey, if we have to make a change, we'll make that change next Monday, and that gives people time to make preparations. And I think Scott or Mr. Hickman one hit on it, that once we make those changes, whatever it may be, that it's also probably beneficial to parents and the staff that we stay with that for some amount of time. And I don't know what that magical amount of time is, but whether it be 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. But I think a lot of our parents' frustration, a lot of our staff frustration is coming from the kind of the back and forth or the uncertainty. And again, I'm not fussing. I get that. I've said this a bunch. This is tough because nobody has the answers to it. So I just wanted to pass along what I've been hearing. But Scott, you when you were talking about AB, you said that schools would determine which students would come which day, and I just like some clarification. If you're talking about just special populations, or if you were talking about that each school will, if you guys decide to go that way, that each school will assign each student A or B. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Generally, as you know, if you were going to split an AB day, you would split the students A through L and M through Z. We know that we have some students who have different last names that are siblings and may need to attend the same day. We may have students who are attending theater schools that might be on site. We think that schools would be best as to work those splits out. If they went A through L, we're not going to mandate that an L student has to go on A day and an M student has to go on B day. There may be some differences between that. We would look at that schools would look to make sure that they have those lower numbers, so we'll be able to appropriately social distance. Does that make sense?
It does, and make sure I'm following you. That I think it's important that we try to keep households together. That way, a parent they can help plan. And I just want to make sure that there'd be some way. And I'll just use myself as an example. Me having a kid in 3 different schools. Obviously, I would like, as a parent, and every parent would like, for my kids to be on the same schedule. And I don't know if Mount Pleasant Elementary does one thing and Mount Pleasant High School does another thing, if that could then conflict in some way.
No, we would, especially those theater schools in Mount Pleasant, or we would try to work where the high school maybe would. We would try to work through those feeder schools to make sure that we're on the same days. Now, as we know, there may be number issues, and we'll have to work through those. But we will try to keep families together, make sure that they're pivoting on the same day. I mean,
And-
not pivoted, to make sure that they're A or B on the same day.
And I just thought about something, and they want to kill me after I say this, but if we used transportation routes, then maybe we don't have to run buses every day. Maybe a bus would run every other day, and I know he wants to choke me right now, but because I get that could be complicated, but that way that would put everybody in the household in the same on the same day that way. But just a thought. But and one last thing, and I'll hush. But to echo kind of what Miss Parker said, I don't think that this is a whether we go AB, whether we go full remote, whatever it is. I don't think that this necessarily my decision as a board member. I think it's your guys' decision, and I don't mind putting my 2 cents worth in, but I think without a doubt that it's your guys' decision, and because I know you spend a lot more time thinking about it than I do. So,
Thank you very much, Ms. Irvin.
Thanks. I'm also echoing off of Kristen, but I want to just stress the emphasis, and I know we all know this, of given the image that we are doing our best. And probably like all of you, I've heard from a multitude of people all across the county, and here some teachers are, knocking it out of the park with remote, and there's some that the kids never even see or hear from their kids. So when we, like Kristen said, I'm always a supporter, want to be a supporter of the staff, but I want to make sure that we're not giving our staff an out either, because, there's some teachers that they're going to go over and above and do more than they can even possibly imagine. And there's others that are going to, get away with what they can get away with. And of course, we like to hope those are definitely the minority. But I just want to really stress that that's coming across, that we're doing our best. I don't know if the answer there is technology or what, but I think from the parents that I have heard from, the way that it was packaged to me and the way I've been trying to present it, that I thought was true per my belief, is that hybrid would be an alternative to going full on remote. And people, they appreciate that because they feel like we're giving them something. I know from some of the schools that have been remote, or even when we closed down, people, as we all know, do not take too kindly to the packets, and we can all understand the reasoning why, but it has put a lot of stress on children and parents. And even with that, something else I'd like to add, if we ever get to where we're in a packet situation, I've had a lot of people tell me about how accommodating those schedules have been. Like literally some have been, come get from, 12 to 1 or whatever, but most parents don't always have that flexibility to definitely accommodate during the school day. So, and I know we don't want to hold our staff there late, but I wish we could keep those people in mind because some people have very little support. So that's just one more thing. And this is probably straying off of the COVID, but it comes to my mind similar. I think we definitely should have waived the rights for us to like track our teachers and how they're doing. But at the same time, and like I say, it's hard for me because I don't want to give the impression, because I think most teachers are doing everything they can, and I know that. But I wonder if it wouldn't be a bad idea to at some point send out some type of accountability survey over just different people that are interacting with children, because as an administrator, I think I would like to see the ones that are going above and beyond and the ones that are not. And it could be not necessarily in regards to remote, but just in regards to general practices overall, even when we are in school. But just maybe something to think about, a way to assess without formally assessing what's going on in the classroom. But again, I just really hope we can give the image that we're doing our best to keep kids in school, whatever that is, because I think it would be appreciated from the public. I've heard a wealth of parents really considering private education when they've never considered that before, and that's disheartening to me because I'm a big believer in public schools, as I know you all are as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howe.
So, which schools went hybrid, tested the hybrid? It was Spring Hill High School, correct? Were there any other schools?
Yes, just Spring Hill High School.
Okay. I'm excited that that worked for them. I'm just worried about the logistics of it working. I mean, in a high school situation, you know, parents aren't involved as much. Parents don't have to take kids to school as much. So, I mean, I think that's excellent that it worked. I do have some doubts about it working in elementary and middle, where your parents having to take that day and figure out what to do with their children. I'm hoping that maybe there's multiple family households, that maybe there's an older brother or sister that can stay home with them. I also want to point out that just because we go to a hybrid schedule doesn't mean we're not going to go remote. Like, if we still have, you know, a high population pop up somewhere or a hotspot pop up, we're still going to have to go remote. And I think some people may have a misnomer about that, maybe misunderstanding that it can still happen just because we go hybrid. It's just like a level. I think of it as levels. Of course, we're at level 1 with in person. Level 2 would be a hybrid option. Level 3 would be the worst case scenario of remote. So I just want to point that out. But I'm interested in that. Now I want to pivot real quick to our numbers and point out that our numbers do not really reflect the county numbers, which to me says that I don't have a problem with people being in school, students and staff alike, because schools are not super spreaders like they were originally thought to be. I think our data has shown that. We can have a hybrid schedule. We can have a remote schedule. Kids on the whole, and maybe even staff, aren't getting this from our schools. I'm not saying it's a zero number, but I'm saying our numbers aren't matching up. If we have 55 kids that have COVID right now, that's less than 1% of our population. It's way less than 1% of our population. However, the county numbers are in excess of 1% of our population. So schools are not our super spreader. I just want to point that having kids in school is more important, and it's showing that our numbers are showing that it's not a super spreader. So I just want to point that out, that's really important that we have our kids in school.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I'll be brief on this. I just would like to say, I know I had a lot of comments earlier. I think adding yet another variable on the 19th or 20th of January moving forward into this already chaotic school year is a bad idea. I think when this was brought up in September, maybe if we could have done this before Christmas break and had a good thing. I just don't think trying to add yet another thing for people to be confused about is going to play out well for anybody. If by now we haven't decided this is the best way to go and we need to do it, I think we need to abandon it, move on, and focus on all of our energies on other things. That's just where I'm at. I would rather see us focusing on the millions of other things that we are sure we need to address. And I would rather just stop talking about this or do it tomorrow, pick one or the other, and let's move on.
Ms. Parker.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back. One thing that Mr. Howe said is that, elementary and middle school parents not having been on AB day like Spring Hill High School, parents are having to figure it out now. Parents had to figure it out when we decided to go remote for a week and a half last week, and parents had to figure out what they were going to do with their kids. And if they test positive, they got to figure out what they're going to do with their kids for about 24 days, is my understanding right now. And that's one of the issues that I have with the metric that we're using right now. When I looked at our Friday memo and it showed the number of students that we have out positive, I've heard from a lot of parents who have had it and have had very serious cases of COVID, but their children either had it or they think they had it. They lost taste, smell, whatnot, but they never, they ran a fever for a day and then they were fine and they never got them tested. And to me, we're using a number when we're talking about our students and we're saying we've only got, one kid that's out at this school. Well, is that really accurate? Because they're not all being tested. We can't really require that we get information about
we can't require them to get tested. And really, we're really wanting to know about their parents, in all honesty, as to whether or not they have to quarantine. And I don't know how we get accurate information on parents if we can't get accurate information on students. I will use Baker School as an example because that's one that I'm familiar with. But the information that we got on Friday said that they have one active positive case. But how many kids are at home quarantined because their parents have been exposed? Because those kids are still remote or have to figure out how to get packets. Parents that are very sick or, dealing with their issues, they've got to figure out how to get their kids logged on while they're isolating from kids. So how are we actually making sure that kids that are at home and may not have COVID but can't come back to school, and nurses are telling them you can't come back, and not just like you can't come back for like 14 days. It's a long period of time. I spoke to somebody just recently who said they as the parent tested positive on January 3rd, and they're being told they can't have their kid back in school until sometime next week, or somewhere along there. And then, a kindergartner who has to wear a mask for an additional number of days, and we've had the mask discussion, we're not going back there. But for them to come back to school early, the child's being required to wear a mask, and the parent said, how's my kindergartner going to wear a mask all day? And they were worried about that because they were told that if the child took off the mask, then they were going to be sent home, because they didn't want to expose the teachers. And I get that, and I don't want them to expose the teachers, but I just think that our numbers are not exactly correct as far as who's really being impacted by all of these COVID issues. And number two, parents are still having to make adjustments. So if they had to make adjustments on AB, I think the main thing is we just want some predictability. So, if we just say, hey, we're going to go with it for the next, until May, and we're just going to roll the dice and see what happens. If that's what we want to do, that's fine. If that's what we feel like is, in the best interest of the school. But when we have to start shutting down because we don't have teachers in classrooms and things like that, that to me is when, as a parent, I'm going to get upset again. Because I'm going to be like, did you do everything to protect the teachers to allow my children to be able to come to school? That's where I'm concerned at this point as a parent and as a board member.
All right, Mr. Hickman.
Hey, I just kind of wanted to put an end cap to this discussion. First of all, every district in the state is trying to figure it out. Some have even gone to the AB and have scrapped it already. Some are trying to start the AB. I mean, we've got districts calling us, asking us, what are we doing? And for all the talk and all the commotion that we've done, we've stayed pretty steady on what we've done. We haven't really moved anything that we've done, except now we want to look at a more accurate way to see the COVID. Instead of using the community number, we wanted a more accurate number. And we knew by watching for a couple of months how the student data was telling us sooner than the community number. And I wish, we could find that district that's figured it out. I've talked to several. Just talked to Rutherford a couple of days ago, and they're having the issues of packets and all these other things, and I understand that. And the one thing that we can't be predictable is when we get that call and says we can't staff our school tomorrow unless we combine classes of 50 kids, which we know we can't do that. That has been the only thing that hasn't really been predictable, is when we get that call because there's an outbreak. And, I wish I could make that more predictable, but we never know. I think Ms. Parker is correct. When we looked at the AB, one of the reasons we looked at that was, would this be a protective layer to our staff instead of having all of their kids there, just half of them? And, we said we went, and I want to go back to our new metric. We did it because we felt it was more accurate. We saw the trend going up before the community did, and we saw the trend coming down before the communities did. And when the health department told us their number is really not reliable, we didn't think that was fair to Maury County by saying, hey, we're going to use a metric that they just told us was not accurate. So, we had to put a lot of that into the thought of it. I've always told my team, and everyone on here on the COVID team will tell you, is the one thing that we say what we're going to do, what we're going to do. The only time we didn't is when we brought the kids back Thursday, because the community number was high, but we needed to get those kids in. They had been out for a month. We had principals and teachers just inundating us with emails, along with parents saying, you know, we need the kids in, and we just needed those kids in. And as we've seen the student numbers, they have fell off. And as you saw today, we went below the initial, our first metric with the community number had to be 965. It went below that today. So the student numbers, once again, even we called it on the back end, trended down and showed us that it was going down. And so I just really want to reiterate, you know, no one is figuring this out. When they do, I believe every other district in the world will be trying to figure out what they're doing.
Thank you very much. I think I don't see any other hand icons up, so we'll move on. Thank you for this great discussion. The zoning facilities. Yeah.
Josh. What?
Mr. Perriman.
Good evening, everyone. A couple of things before we get into the actual agenda. Just want to let you know that when I left the office this afternoon, we are down out of the 1,500 folks that we time surveyed on sick days, personal days, vacation days to do their leave. We are down to 18 employees that we've not been able to settle leave with them as of this afternoon. The bulk of those, we are waiting on other districts to send us information where they transferred sick days from those districts. And for some reason, that information never was transferred into our system. And as those folks are clearing that up, we're dropping that pretty rapidly. So we're monitoring that weekly right now. We have that number down. We expect it to be done here in the next few days. And then we will turn clean information over to the county once they implement that Chronos system that Doug is pushing through right now. So that's just an FYI, because I know several of you have had calls about different issues surrounding that. So the second thing is we have turned over all street listings and all rosters for schools next year based off of current housing right now to the instruction and the attendance department, and we are working with them to get letters out to everyone right now saying where they are zoned for next year. And we are also working with instruction to make sure that our staffing and our movement of teachers and things will start to settle over the next month and a half as master schedules are built. And then Mr. Parkhurst and I meet tomorrow with the title folks as we are planning title for next year and where resources may have to be shifted or how that would look. So just an FYI, we're deep into that. Hopefully we will be able to get those letters out in the next little bit. But if you have questions of that, please direct folks to me, and then I'll get them to the appropriate folks on the other side, depending on what the question specifically is.
All right, Rob, we do have a question. Mr. Moore.
Yeah, just real quick. I know, just to make sure there's no loose ends on the McDowell issue, I know we're in the January schedule. Is there anything that was on that timeline that we have not wrapped up or that we need to still finish up on that?
Yes, if you look down to number 7 under operations, or number 6, excuse me, I have McDowell listed. I can go ahead and talk about that now, and then we'll just skip it later. We are at the point in January through March where we are to, on the timeline, it was basically to decide what we're going to do with the building once we exit it after this school year. And once you guys make that decision and give us directions on how to move forward with the purpose of the building and how we're using it, then we can start the process of whatever that looks like, whether it be to hold it, repurpose it, demolish it, sell it, whatever your wishes may be. That's just really where we are, is for you guys to have that discussion. I had that down as number 6, and I had as number 7 the 5-year building plan. Mr. Fulbright has already mentioned the Saturday work session to you guys, and really those were just my two placeholders to really say, hey, this is where we are, and we need a date for that Saturday session where we could really get into some discussion about these things. But that's where we are on the McDowell timeline right now.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the only thing to wrap up is the facility itself. I guess I was more asking about, was there anything on the timeline as far as in relations to parents or students or staff or anything else? I just want to make sure we've met all of our obligations to the public on that.
We are in that January window of getting that information out to everyone. And what we're working through right now is Ms. Branton over in the student information and the student management system is working to drop some spreadsheets in that will actually align and send specific letters to specific addresses. And so we were able to do that when we opened Battle Creek. And so we're working through that process right now. We have given the schools the street listings and the rosters for next year. I've spoken with Mr. Cobb. I've sent him the street listings as well. We're going to post those along with maps. Problem with posting the maps is when we convert them out of the mapping system over to a PDF that's postable, they're not the clearest maps in the world. So we're going to work through those things and get that done here in the next few days.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Lindsay.
Mr. Pearman, speaking about McDowell building, is staff ready to make a recommendation what to do with that piece of property?
If you're asking, am I ready to make a recommendation? I'm ready anytime you would like to hear what I think. An official recommendation between the director and Mr. Gaines and I, we've not really vetted all the way through. We've had preliminary discussions on that. Part of what we wanted to do is just see if you guys went a direction that we hadn't really thought about or anything from there.
Is that something we could bring up at a plan? Is that something we could bring up at a planning retreat?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, do you have any others?
No.
Okay, so I kind of blended my two announcements there on the front end with items number 6 and 7. So when I get back to those, if anything comes up, just let me know. The first things there are just your FYIs. And if we had been able to meet in person tonight, Train had a small presentation for you guys. You guys saw a budget amendment tonight for right at $49,000. That was a refund, an EBATE refund from Train on where we paid our bill ahead of time, and we were able to get money back for them. And so I'm going to mention that money in detail here in just a minute. But we've got a couple of things. We also have just a meet and greet the next time that we're with you guys. We have a new SRO that is unlike any SRO you've ever seen. So we're going to bring that person. The Sheriff's Department's really excited about coming and meeting with you guys and showing you something. So when I get to see you in person again, we've got some good stuff for you. Number 3 on there is really the first thing for a discussion. Mr. Fulbright, Mr. Lindsay, and I, along with the director, have talked about this a little bit. Mr. Hall and I have been to the city of Mount Pleasant and met with the officials there. There is a water issue in the neighborhood next to Mount Pleasant Middle School. This is the part of the neighborhood that has been built within the last couple of years. We have a retention pond that does exit our property, has been there since 2001. That they are questioning and saying that it is flooding their new neighborhood. They brought this back to Mr. Hickman's attention, and Mr. Fulbright asked that we put this on here just to give you an FYI and to seek direction from you as to how to proceed. We have talked to the city. We've met with them, looked at the property. I know they've contacted Mr. Wooliver. I've been in contact with Mr. Wooliver about this as well. But it just sort of seems to keep coming up. So we're just bringing this to you. You did see some images that were uploaded there with your agenda, and then we'll just wait for direction on or discussion on that topic.
Well, and I'll add too, I went down there and met with their planning folks and utilities folks before Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving. And it was my impression they were going to bring us some suggestions. Has that changed at all, or what was your understanding?
that was basically where we were as well. In our discussion with them, there are many variables to this, I believe, and I believe that residents of that neighborhood are pretty upset with the city. The city has said, well, hey, this water is all coming off of the schools. They did give us some information about, as these neighborhoods have been developed, maybe some retention ponds that the builders were supposed to put in weren't put in, that may be leading to some issues. And we just right now have just kind of taken the position of that pond's been there since '01. We hadn't heard anything about it until now. And if we need to do anything further between what they say and what we say, we need to get guidance from you on how you want us to move forward, whether it's bringing in an outside person or taking their recommendation or what. But we've just kind of rolled with it right now because we've not fielded water issues since 2001, and suddenly we're fielding lots of water issues when our side of the ditch hasn't changed, but the other side has changed dramatically. So.
Mr. Lindsay.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important we hear from Mr. Wolver, kind of get his opinion on what he thinks we should or should not do moving forward.
Sounds good. Mr. Wolver.
Good evening. I've spoken to Ms. Collier a couple of times on this. From what I understand, the detention pond was put in with no outlet. So when enough rainwater builds up in the detention pond, it overflows and puts a high volume of water out at once. Honestly, I don't know if it was designed that way or if it was designed another way and put in incorrectly, or if something has changed over time. So I can't really say as far as what your responsibility is. I mean, if it was designed and constructed the city specs in 2001 and nothing has changed on the school system's part, then there's probably no liability there. If it's a maintenance issue and something has changed because maybe sediment has built up over time or something has eroded within the detention pond structure or mechanisms, then you might have some issues there. I mean, my recommendation would be to be a little bit proactive and send somebody out to look at and get you an opinion as opposed to relying on the city's opinion. It would be nice to know where you stand before we get sued by one of these downstream property owners. So, I mean, I think there's potentially some liability there for the school, but I can't tell you exactly how much without knowing what the issue exactly is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sims.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is this a ongoing issue, or was this one of those floods that was the 100-year floods? Because there's lots of areas that flooded, during that time, and just didn't know if this was occurring once a month or how often.
I think the first time we heard about it was following the June 1 rains, which those rains were very, very significant. We've had issues in Culleoka. We've had issues in Spring Hill at Spring Hill High School with some neighbors that we've been able to we've stepped up and said, you're right. We did something here that caused this water to flow onto you, and we were able to fix those rather easily. This situation we have, the first time it came up was in the summer, coming off of that June rain. We do have the images that they sent to us here. They say are September images. We just received those last week, but they say they were from September, and I have no reason to doubt that. But those are the only two images that we've seen of water during that time.
I believe the ones they showed me in November were listed as being from September, so that's probably the same ones. Mr. Sims, do you have any other?
Yeah, no, I just, like I said, lots of places flooded that normally don't flood. If that was just an anomaly that's going to happen every 100 years, I don't know that we need to jump in and take immediate action. Just my opinion. If it's something that's reoccurring pretty regularly, maybe, but that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Howell.
Yeah, I'm actually very familiar with that area. I've got some friends that live over in that area. And just pulling up a quick map and looking, it's like there's a creek, whether it's a wet weather creek or whatever, that flows through that area. And those houses that are on Mockingbird, well, Brookside, which is the neighborhood over, which I believe is the one that's flooding, those are all brand new houses and that are downstream. So if the water was flowing correctly before, and then after the new construction, the water's not flowing as well, I'm not sure that it's entirely our liability. Now, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a hydrologist or I'm not a lawyer, but it is something I think we should probably get a second opinion on and look at, see what we can do to solve the issue, if it's our issue to solve.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because I rode through those neighborhoods right after I met with them, and it's basically nothing more than a little ditch that looks like it was cut through there. And it flows, and this is what I pointed out to them and why I think it would be wise to get an outside perspective. It flows towards the bypass, and there is a heavily grown up fence line that it runs into. So that easily could be backing a lot of that up. So that's why I think we need to get some outside perspective. Mr. Lindsay.
What you're pointing out is not even on our property.
Exactly. Yeah. Mr. Lindsay.
I just wanted to just make a statement that I guess the middle school was built in 2001, somewhere in that time frame, and if we go back and look at the plans and see that it was constructed according to those plans, and then we've done nothing different in that time, it's just hard for me to see where the school system holds any liability in that. But it's taken 20 years for it to show up. But I would think that it would be pretty easy for someone to pull those plans out and see that if the school was constructed according to those, then there is some liability. Then maybe that goes back on architects, engineers, whomever. But I think probably should be one of the.
If I'm hearing you guys correctly, if I could take the liberty to say at the school board meeting in 2 weeks, what we could do is reach out to a couple of resources we have. One is Mr. Spencer and Mr. Hewlett. They could help us with this. The second thing is probably going through Liberty Mutual and really looking at their liability folks who could help us with not only examining the plans, but maybe coming back and giving a recommendation. I could at least reach out to them and find whether those folks would be able to help us look at this answer, or if someone else would, and if there would be any cost available, bring the answers to those questions back to you at the board meeting, and then you could give me specific direction if you wanted to. I think we can probably get it done without cost. However, I'd hate to tell you that tonight and then somebody say, oh no, it's gonna cost this much for us to come do that. So if that's okay with you guys, we can get on that and see if we can line up help that you would be approving of.
Yes, if you could follow up on some of those, we'd appreciate that.
Okay. And what we will do is once we talk to folks, anything, just to make sure everybody's okay with this, anything that we get that might be an addition to the agenda for you guys, we would email you that addition before we posted it, just so that everyone's aware that hey, we've got some additional information on this topic for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Parker.
And Eric, I think you may have answered my question, but I just wanted to clarify. So you're going to look and see if we can have essentially a second opinion through our insurance provider or through Hewlett Spencer, but we're not looking to incur any costs at this point without board approval.
Correct.
Okay. I will just say, I mean, I think in Mount Pleasant historically, don't they historically have issues with water? I mean, I haven't lived here my whole life, but I feel like most of the time I've been here, there's always been an issue about Mount Pleasant water at some point. So I'm not trying to be judgmental, but 20 years later to come back and say that the school that we built in an area that they've then changed, it kind of boggles my mind why they think. I mean, when I looked at the videos, I honestly was like, I don't even see the school. And I mean, I just saw houses with water flooding, and it stinks for those homeowners. I don't disagree with that, but I'm not really sure why exactly this would be our problem to solve. So I would definitely be curious to see. I mean, I don't want to be contrary and not provide help, but I don't just go out and help somebody that lives, 2 streets over from me either, and just assume that that's my responsibility. And I don't think we should either.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sims, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else? Or did I just not put it
No, I
right
don't.
now?
I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Mr. Perryman, continue on, please.
Okay, moving on to number 4. And I apologize if the attachment did not open correctly. The attachment to the agenda for me is not opening the correct way. We'll get that fixed if you're experiencing that. What this is we have the HVAC room at Central High School that houses the mainframe for the district. We moved that from Whitthorne last year over into a room at Central High School, that we felt was better climate controlled. And because of the amount of equipment that we have in that room, and Tommy's on and Dave Hall are as well, they can speak to this, it is imperative that we keep a consistent temperature to make sure that everything's running. We thought the room could handle it, and we have found out that it cannot. We're putting off heat off of those computers that is just absolutely wearing the system out. Experiences that we've had in service are things that we've experienced from that. I mentioned to you before there was a $49,000 refund from Train that we got off of their Ebates. We've had this bid for several months. And when we got that amount of money, I just said, okay, this is a place that we can use money that we've saved through energy to come back in and help us energy wise. So it's a $40,000 cap. We don't think it'll be quite 40,000, but what we will come in and do is add additional units to this room and work through the rooftop, really house this the correct way so that we don't have interruptions to our server and to the technology of the district. And right now with remote learning, with online testing, with everything that we're experiencing, this is a must. We didn't have the money for it, so this comes in nicely. So this would actually come through no cost to the budget. It would come off of the refund money. And we're just asking you to look at that.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that at the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any discussion, or do you want to put it on the consent agenda group?
Consent.
Consent agenda. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Next.
Number 5 is fencing at Highland Park and at Spring Hill Elementary School. This would be finishing the fence at Spring Hill Elementary School around their playground. We've been working in conjunction with the power company to clear a bank along that playground to where we can come in and fence it, and it'll be completely fenced. We're also going to do a little bit of reworking to make the gate larger so the power company can get into the playground easier, just because there is a transformer that's they have to go in there to service. So that would be doing that. The second thing is at Highland Park, the fencing at Highland Park is in very bad shape. It's been constructed in phases over time. We're going to come in and take all of the old fencing down, clean the property line off, and then come back and re-fence it. And this will give us a clear property line that we can maintain both sides of the fence. We're going to do what we've done everywhere else and back the fence off of the property line so that we can control both sides of it. And one of the things that we see there now is that we have so many neighbors that oftentimes on the back side of that fence, we're experiencing different types of things that keep it from being safe. So those 2 projects would both be funded out of the Safe Schools grant, and that is money that has been allotted to us from the state.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is that something to go on consent? Yes. Or okay? Is it consent the direction the board wants to go?
Yes.
We'll assume that you
Yeah, consent.
Okay.
And then back to 6 and 7. 6 is the McDowell building plan. 7 is the 5-year building plan, and all we had those on there for was just a reminder that we needed a date to talk about that. I know you mentioned that, so I'll just leave that to you guys.
Well, do we want to continue and do a Saturday morning? That seemed to be very productive last time we did that. Is that the will of the board?
Yes.
Okay, 30th of January, how's that? Either that or
yes.
Okay, 30th of January or the 6th of February.
I can't do the 30th of January.
I won't
I
be
can't,
asleep.
30th is not good for me.
It's not good for
The
me
6th
either.
would be better.
Okay, well then it sounds like the 6th is going to be the better date.
If we're doing it on the 6th, y'all better bring me cake.
Is that your birthday?
My birthday.
Will you eat it?
Yes. Will I eat cake?
Mr. Fulbright?
Yes.
I would like to interject, first of all, that the governor did extend the orders to, I think, February 26th. However, and Jake may want to speak on that, but he feels that if we want to do in person, that we're allowed, but I'll let him speak on that if you don't mind, Jake.
Sure, it's up to you guys. I mean, the school systems are exempt from what we're gathering from the comptroller's office. So it comes down to your preference. There's no guidance for the school system one way or the other.
Okay, so then as of right now, this will be an in-person meeting. If we have to adjust it, we will adjust it closer to the time. But as for right now, it'll be in person.
What, well, the meeting, you're talking about the regular meeting and the work session in person.
No, wait a minute. Say that again.
Talking about the February meeting.
I'm just specifically talking about the board,
Huh?
the board retreat right now.
Okay.
And I will go ahead and say, just for clarification, my plan is to have in-person meetings in February, but that is not written in cement quite yet.
Okay.
But that is my preference. All right, so we will meet Saturday morning, February 6th for a board retreat to do some 5-year planning discussions and talk about DAL as well as instructional goal setting for the grant that we anticipate.
What time?
I have 9 on my phone, but that's just what I put down. I'm flexible on time. 9 agreeable?
It's all right.
That's
Earlier the better.
Earlier the better.
Do
Are
what?
we looking at a
I'm thinking
3-hour window?
We could just have a donut for David. He might eat a donut if it's a birthday with a big candle.
A lot of cake.
Or maybe a
How
brand
many
muffin. I don't know.
donuts? How
All
many
right.
donuts will we need, David?
I think that hammers that one out. Miss Irvin, your hand's up.
I just wanted, is it a 3-hour? I just like to know to plan just for different reasons, things going on. 9 to 12, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, right now I'm anticipating 9 to 12. We're not going past 12.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not. If y'all want to talk longer, you can, but I'll be gone.
We better have a tight agenda, and staff better be ready to make their recommendations.
Yes, I think this is going to be a very productive meeting based off what we've already talked about. Anything under policies, Mr. Hickman?
No, sir, not at this time. We are working on some of our Chapter 6 or Section 6 right now.
Okay. Mr. Gaines.
Mr. Chairman, we've been working on reviewing the instructional policies. I think they were the November, December, and we need to. I guess if we want to make a recommendation, I'll go with y'all. We can send out the policies and any recommended changes, or send the policies and no change, and then Mr. Chairman, if y'all would like to meet then with the appropriate staff and discuss those if we have changes. We can get that accomplished and just send you out, hey, here are the policies that we're recommending some changes for you guys to review. And that's just getting in the line, trying to get back caught up with our policy review.
Yeah, those of you that have been on the board a little bit longer, how is the best way that we've handled this in the past?
I would recommend that we will do our due diligence and say, hey, here are the recommended changes, and maybe we'll send out those policy listings, and then you guys give you the guys some time to look at it, and then we could, if we need to meet, or if you are okay with the policies as they are, we can bring those. If we have changes, we can just bring those to the next meeting, or not to the next meeting, but maybe the meeting after that.
Okay, is that agreeable with the board?
Yeah, I don't see any need to address policies that don't need, that there's no suggested changes. So
Right, exactly. Okay, so we'll proceed in that manner then.
Thank you. We'll get them to you.
Thank you. Under other business, instructional low bids purchases over $10,000. Mr. Gaines. Anything under that? That has your name on a couple of them there.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
So the first item is a federal programs packet. This continues to purchase additional computers for to round us out in third grade. As you know, we had ESSER funding, and we also applied for additional funding through the remote technology grant, and we received those additional funds back, and we're using those funds to continue purchasing computers to get us down through third grade. If Chris or Renee has anything to add, I'll be glad to let them do that also.
Okay.
This is Chris. This purchase will actually get us down to second grade. These are touchscreen Chromebooks for second grade, and we will have enough extra to cover third grade too as well.
Okay, thank you very much for adding to that. Any other information on the other three that we need to know?
Just let me go to the next one. The next one is, as you know, we just talked to you about the ESSER 2.0 grant. We were thinking, as Renee Plokovic indicated to you earlier, that we would have a short timeline on approving, getting the grant in and approving. And we were thinking we wanted to get in line if we were going to order these additional devices for students. So we drafted this purchase so we wouldn't have to we could bring it to you and say, once we were able to receive those funds and gain approval, if it happened before the next board meeting, that we would be able to go ahead and purchase those.
What is the will of the board on that one?
I'd say consent.
Is there any conversation about any of these four, or can they all go on consent?
Okay.
We good? Ms. Parker,
I got a
your hand's
question.
up. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Parker.
So I thought at the retreat we were going to talk about how we wanted to look at spending all the ESSER 2.0 funds. I thought
That is
one of the
very true.
discussion
So is this something that we need to maybe put off then until after that retreat? Although we can't make any decisions at the retreat, is this something that we could move on to the February meeting? Well, no, that would take place before the retreat. Never mind. That won't work. All right, board, what do we want to do with this?
Well, I'll just, since Chris is on here, I'll ask, you mentioned that those laptops for the Chromebooks would go down to second grade. I thought that when we've had previous discussions, the discussion was that we were going to do K2 iPads. So when did that change happen?
Based off going back and re-talking to principals and from information from their staff, the cost to add a keyboard to an iPad in second grade was approximately $70, $80 more a device than to give a touchscreen Chromebook, which is what these are actually. So after talking to all the principals, that ended up being the discussion that it makes the most sense from staff to make that transition from a touch to a keyboard for testing when it comes to that third grade level. Is kind of a happy medium for both, and those would stay in second grade for those. Moving on to that next one, I mean, the iPads are, that's the K1, that's all inclusive. That the price that's on there, and I think we highlighted it a couple times. I'm pretty sure Renee circled it a couple of times, that it is they're actually still working on some more discounts on some of the services and devices for us. We just wanted to get that on there because of the approval timeline of the ESSER 2.0 items. So we wanted to go ahead and again, get in line. I mean, we talked about last time when we did ESSER 1.0, it was 6 months before we saw some devices almost. So that was our hope here, to kind of go ahead and get an approval to get in line for that.
I will say, if you want to put it on the February board agenda for us to vote on, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, but I would really like to see an overall picture of how many devices that we have. Because these one-time funds are great, but I think, as Mr. Moore's mentioned before, we then have to service them, which then means we need to add staffing to be able to load all of these devices with, unless people from your department are just going to want to work tons and tons of overtime. I think that ends up adding to our cost, and that's something that would be an ongoing expense that I don't think that we would be able to cover off of these grant funds based on that earlier presentation. So I just really think that we need to have a better idea of how many devices we have gotten into our system and how many devices we're going to eventually have to replace in 3 to 5 years as well, when funds aren't necessarily going to be there for COVID or whatnot.
That really goes back to that the presentation in December that kind of talked through some of those numbers and where it looked like for us. The biggest difference in this, and really what I presented then, was a matter of we have the funds to kind of purchase these outright and not worry about the payment plan. But we still have the ability, obviously, when 3 or 4 years come up, when they're starting to get to that end of life, we have the ability to, look at some things there. But that plan did present, we did look at adding 2 new people, and we were talking about putting that in the budget moving forward. But something that really, the next couple of years actually end up being easier, in my opinion, because they're newer devices. We're not fixing older devices and continue to work on those slow ones and stuff. So, but I mean, I think Tommy's working on a plan as well to even look for some savings. I don't want to talk for him here about one of those people that we requested in that plan. But yeah, I mean, just kind of throwing all out there that it was something that we did. 2 people was mentioned, but this would get us to every kid having a device. So it's what was asked of by the principals.
Well, let me just say, let me just say too, though, I mean, obviously you said that, I think you're trying to imply that, I can look back to your presentation in December, but since your presentation in December, you've gotten information from principals that it sounds like want to transition second graders to touchbook Chromebooks, which if I didn't ask that question, I would have assumed that we were still on iPads. So I don't know all the details that you've had conversations, and I appreciate that, but I don't have an idea of how many devices we have in this district. I know that I have a 4th grader. I know my 4th grader doesn't have a device. So we hear all these things all the time, and we are told all these things, but the reality is a lot different. Now, I'm not saying that 4th graders are not going to get a device, but getting a device in February or March is a lot different than getting a device that we thought that we were potentially going to get several months ago. And the instruction that we were planning on providing with those devices is very different when we're not getting it for several months. So, if we know that we're going to just be getting into a line and we're not going to get these devices for 6 months, personally, I have a little bit of a problem with that when we know that we have all this learning loss and we're not really addressing that, but we're just buying devices that, we're going to pay somebody else to put, or we're going to pay an additional person to try to get up and running, hopefully for the next school year for new kids. There will be 12th graders that it doesn't even impact. And this money is supposed to go towards them too, in my opinion. So I'm not opposed necessarily in general to 2 devices, but I just think we really need a clear picture from technology as to how you guys are going, some expectations and just the numbers. And personally, I feel like we're getting away from some of the ideas that we had talked about before, which was getting buy-in from the county commission on what we actually needed to have devices on a regular basis. And when we're just finding these magical dollars that are out there, then we're kind of letting them, I kind of feel like we're letting them off the hook in some ways. And that may be what they want. And so maybe that's our only option. But I do think that, if we're going to have devices in our district long term, we're going to have a sustainability plan that goes beyond, one-time grants.
I'll definitely get those updated numbers for you based off the most recent deliveries that we've had down to the fourth graders. And then obviously with that the first Chromebook mentioned, excuse me, where we're finishing up ESSER 1.0 funds and then add to that from there. But yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. And we talked when we originally talked about all these funds on making sure we still try to find a way to get that budget in that 1.5 million that we talked about back in December, because while this gets us one-to-one K through 12, it does not update the devices that 11 and 12th graders have, like you just mentioned, and that's kind of where we've still got to have that funds for all of them students to upgrade. I mean, we're getting six years into diploma devices, so we really got to like Tommy's mentioned, like we've all mentioned, start upgrading those. Hence the reason why we still want to push for that budgetary item being there.
Mr. Lindsay.
I just wanted to say that I would just as soon vote on it in our meeting in February. We just, since we're only going to meet for 3 hours on that retreat, that we can have one issue taken care of before we even get to the retreat. So personally, I'd just soon go ahead and tackle this issue at our meeting in February.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irvin?
Hey there, my question's for Chris, and it's probably a silly question, but it's one I've been asked and it's running through my mind. And talking in lines like with Kristen about replacing these devices as things go wrong. That $30 fee that parents were allowed to potentially pay for insurance, is that, because I've heard two things. I've heard that the device becomes maybe the child's device and it goes with them from year to year. So is that like a one-time fee that covers that child with that device as long as they have that device, even if it's in subsequent grades, or is that a per year thing? And I ask that because in relation to how that insurance policy may work. So,
well, we per Schiffer and Doug, we can't call it technically an insurance policy, which is why we offered it as a deposit type of thing. And we have had a discussion going back, just before this about some policies around the way the student handbook talks about textbooks and lab fees type scenarios. We believe that moving forward, we try to make it a yearly fee. And that's actually very similar to counties surrounding us. I know we're different. I'm just, trying to look outside to see what other people do that have already been one-to-one, that have been doing this for, a few years. And so we would look at that being a yearly type fee, with obviously exceptions for different scenarios and different, free reduced lunch, people like that, students like that, is kind of what we were thinking through. But that's actually something that we're going to try to come together and agree on to present to you all as a policy or an edit to one of the policies that we currently have around textbooks.
okay, thank you. But and then to clarify, is that self-funded, that account? Then it's something that we pull that money and then have it, or is it another facility?
I'm not sure the exact definition on that. I know Schiffer is the one that worked through with I don't know if she's still on here or not, but she's the one who worked through me with that. I know that we've actually already purchased some additional devices for I put air quotes on it when I sent it to the librarians and principals, but it's called hot swappable units in case one's damaged that we've got to send off for warranty or repair, wait on a part. Those we've actually purchased some with those funds to do that already.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moore.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Kristen said earlier. I'm always want us to be very cautious as we spend one-time funding for these things that we know are going to be recurring costs, especially the replacement costs on these devices. And I know she was asking for that information. I just want to, as we keep moving ahead, especially coming into budget time, we can't let, and I'm not trying to be, confrontational with the county commission, but we cannot let them off the hook thinking that this is not going to be a year-to-year expense that we will have from this day forward. Just because we may get a little lucky and we can use some of this funding, some, not all, or not even most, to be honest, of the ESSER funding to go towards that. The people on the county commission side of this need to understand this is just like gas. This is just like keeping the lights on. These are expenses we are going to have, and we can't. They can't think just because this showed up this time that we get a pass anything further than just this immediate need. And I'm still at those numbers. If you could also, Chris, make sure we have a clear understanding of what the year-to-year replacement cost starts to look like, especially getting there is obviously one step, maintaining it being the second piece that we have to be mindful of as a board. And we have short memories, by the way. So the more you can keep that number in front of us, the better off we all are. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Would then be the board's wish to go ahead and move this to the meeting in February, but not put it on consent at this time?
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with all three of them being on consent, but I mean, for the February meeting.
I would prefer it to be a voting issue on this one.
Yeah, let's put these four on the agenda, but leave them off of the consent.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of everything I have on my agenda. Oh, no, I did want to mention too, we somewhere along the lines did not get to vote on the tool that we were going to use for the director's evaluation.
We discussed.
We discussed it, but we never. Is that something we need to vote on? It's my understanding that we would.
Yes, you need to adopt that as a board. I mean,
that's what I thought.
The approved instrument.
I know we had approved an instrument, but we were going to want to make some change to the scoring, I know. And I think some board members may have had some other questions or clarifications on the tool itself. I would like to include that as a part of our discussion at the next board meeting. And are there any objections to putting that on next month's agenda?
No. I believe we either need to do that or we need to have another agreement with our director to delay it another month, one or the other.
Yeah, I think we can probably get it hammered out at the February meeting.
So
if not, then we'll look at another agreement.
So do you want me to put it on the board regular meeting?
Regular meeting agenda for February, yes, sir.
And include the attachment again so that we can look at it.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other items that we need to address, we will see each other on the, actually, we'll see each other in February for our regular board meeting. First Tuesday of February. Anything else?
Yes. Can we just make sure that prior to the retreat that there is a clear agenda, a timeline of what we're looking to accomplish?
Yes, there will be.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, we will stand adjourned.